Those go rather quickly. So, but generally speaking, you can expect it's going to be 6 to 8 months before you're actually hired. If you're in a hurry, we're not the place to live. We're slow and deliberate on everything we do. Once you are hired, every 5 years, you have to complete that SF-86 again, just like you're applying for your job all over again. You're going to undergo a security interview. I just had mine done 1st of January. They're going to do another credit check on you. They're going to go and interview your current neighbors. They're going to interview your supervisor and coworkers that work with you. They're going to interview the references that you put on there all over again. So it's the same thing. And depending on the type of clearance you have, of course, you may have to have a polygraph, which I do. I won't next year because I got out of that clearance, finally. And something else that the FBI is mandating all of us to do now because of Robert Hansen. I don't know if y'all remember Robert Hansen. He was a spy that was in our organization that was a supervisor. And a lot of people didn't question a lot of what he did because he was a supervisor. But because of him, we now have much tighter security. So I can walk through my office and successfully tell you I can't get into a whole lot of space except in the mailroom, the break room, and the bathroom. The hallways. Everything else is locked down, and my badge will not actually let me unlock any of those doors because I don't have a need to be in those office space because they do have the top secret SCI, FCI, counterintelligence, all that stuff that I wouldn't know what I'm looking at anyway. So, but you have to do that every 5 years. So I'm celebrating my 20th come June, so it's back in my face again. So, but other than that, it's a great organization to work for. So, do you have any questions? Anything you'd like to know? Yes, ma'am.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about that test that people are required to take. What is the format of that? Is it kind of like
it's a
analytical
three-part
questions or
test.
Three-part?
It's three-part. The first part is going to be, they just redid our test, so I have to stop and think of the name of it. There's situational judgment. There's critical thinking, which is, it used to be math. The logical thinking used to be math.
You said the logical thinking?
Logical thinking, and then we've been under a freeze for a while, so I haven't given any tests since last year, so I'm having issues struggling with the first test. It's basically, the first test, they're going to give you scenarios, and you have to pick what you would most likely do in that situation. The next time portion of the test is the logical thinking, which is where the math used to be. They did away with math, and they gave you word problems. The applicants actually looked more exasperated after that than they did after the math. A lot of them complained and said, I'd rather have the math. And then, of course, the last portion is going to be situational judgment, where they will give you a situation, and you have to say what you would most likely do and least likely do. And to be honest with you, they tell you, the first test is biodata inventory, where it's an inventory of yourself. It's like a personality profile.
You said the first part?
The first part is the biodata inventory. It just came to me.
What?
Biodata inventory. It does like a psychological profile of you. How they grade it, I don't know. All I know is you have wonderful scantrons and they run them through a machine. And all they tell us is pass or fail. They don't tell us where you did well or you did worse.
Do you know if that's a similar test to what they use in all the other little government agencies or anything?
I only know about the FBI. The one question I do get a lot is what's the difference between the FBI and the CIA? The FBI's jurisdiction is on all American-owned soil and properties, which is why we have offices in 60 territories overseas, because of our U.S. military installations and our U.S. embassies. Anytime a crime's committed, we're going to be the lead investigative agency in that crime. So the CIA is anything but American-owned property and soil. So it kind of gives you a little understanding. We call them spooks because you never see them. But we do have a CIA agent that works in our office, and they're part of our what we call task forces. I don't know if you've heard in the news, you hear them talking about the task forces, or if you watch Gangland on the cable channels, our actual gang task force was featured on Gangland because we took down a huge gang over in Columbia. And I believe it was over in the Saxon Homes section over there where we went in and we took down about 100 people, got them off the streets. Our number one investigation right now are gangs. Aside from terrorism, it's going to be gangs that we're going after because they are nothing but modern day time gangsters and mobsters from back in the old days, which was in 1908 when we were created. That's why we were created, because the gangsters and the mobsters were robbing banks and killing people and going across state lines, and the local sheriff and police department was having a hard time because they couldn't leave their jurisdiction to pursue them. So our director, which at that time was J. Edgar Hoover, went to the president and said, we need to create a federal agency to help our local partners be able to get these guys and bring them back to justice. So that's how we came into being, is because of that. So we go across state lines and we get them. We send information to our offices in those territories, and they get them, ship them back to South Carolina, and the FBI steps aside and the locals go in and prosecute them for the crimes they've committed. So that's how we came into being. But yeah, gangsters, gangs, modern day gangs are nothing but old day mobs. They're still committing the same crimes. It's money laundering, drugs, political corruption. So public corruption of local officials. It's all of that. Murders, you name it, bribes. It's all there. Nothing's changed. It's just more modern day. That's all. So.
Are we making any progress with that?
Actually, we are. Our gang task force, our drug squad in Columbia, out of the 56 offices, Columbia, as far as the number of arrests and convictions that have been made when it comes to drugs and gangs, we rank in the top 20 out of 56 offices, which is phenomenal for the size office we are, because we're considered small. By hiring statistics, we rank about midway with some of our large field offices. So that's not bad. On average, we average about between 10 and 15 people getting hired a year, which is great for the size of the office we are. We have 120 employees in the whole state. I can tell you Little Rock, Arkansas is the same size office as Columbia, and they average one hire a year. I don't know what their drug statistics and their gang statistics are. I can tell you in the last year and a half, we've taken almost 300 people off the streets for gangs and drugs.
How long do they usually end up staying off? Does it depend on what?
It depends on the crime that they're charged with. It depends on whether or not it's a first offense, second offense. If it's multiple, then they're going to get more time. But we're very proactive in the community.
Have we got any kind of proactive rehab kinds of things that's doing anything, working, because it says, and most of the literature says that the reason people get into, or the children get into these gangs, teenagers do, is because they don't have any.
There's no guidance at home. There's no parental oversight.
Exactly.
I worked at DJJ for a year before I went to the FBI, and I can tell you, the majority of the kids who are out there, all they need is someone to pay them some attention and spend time with them. Mm-hmm. That's all they, and they wouldn't come back. You'd be surprised how many of them get out, go home, they send them home on probation, and 3 days later they're back out at the institution.
Because they didn't.
And you know what happens? They become institutionalized individuals, and that's because that's the only place they know where they can get their own clothing. Because a lot of these kids come in, they share clothing with siblings. They don't have anything that is their own. We had one child that I just felt my heart broke for him because he came in and I was like, what's he for? They caught him breaking into vending machines. He wasn't stealing the money, he was stealing the food and the beverage because he was hungry.
Right.
So they sent him in for 45 days. We did an evaluation on him, sent him back to family court. Family court sent him home on probation because it was the first time he'd ever been caught doing what he was doing. 2 days later, he was back at the R&E Center, and I was like, why is he back out here? He just went home. They said, well, he went home and he tried to commit suicide.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason he said he wanted to come back was because he had his own bed. He had 6